Do you think more troops being sent to Afghanistan is the best way to deal with the situation?
More troops to Afghanistan, best thing to deal with the situation. Let's go to Iain first for this one.
I think we should send the extra troops, we should equip them properly, they should do the job training the Afghani army, and then they should come home.
As simple as that?
Yes.
Do you agree with the extra 500 troops that Gordon Brown has sent this week?
I think if that's what it takes to do the job, then absolutely we should send them, but we need to make sure that they're properly equipped and they're properly supported.
Okay.
But of course the thing is it's not enough to do the job, is it? That's the problem. McChrystal's report says they need 45,000 troops. America is going to have to carry the whole of the burden on that. Sarkozy said just yesterday he has no intention of sending any more French troops. This is a NATO expedition, and our partners in NATO are simply not stepping up on this, and far more attention should be put on that. But just quickly back to the main question, and I'm glad it's come up because the gentleman at the back raised it as well. It strikes me that there are a number of failings about our actions in Afghanistan, and the first and the easiest to remedy is a political failing, a terrible failure of political leadership, which has failed very badly in recent years on the part of all parties to explain why our troops are there in the first place. Because of the two tasks we had and have in Afghanistan, the first, to ensure that it can never again be a base from which Al-Qaeda can openly run training camps to attack people in America, here, across the Middle East. That phase was pretty much sorted out in the first months of the operation and could continue to be sorted out by retreating to bases and having unmanned drone attacks from the air and so on. But the second part of our mission there is a very long way away from completion. Indeed, people have talked about it as a 30-year conflict. I think that could easily be the case. And the situation that we need to do is this. Afghanistan and Afghani society has to be protected, has to be bolstered up to ensure that never again can it fall under the barbaric, medievalist is to flatter it, form of tyranny that the Taliban imposed on them. For that to happen, Afghan civil society, not least Afghanistan's women, have to be bolstered from the situation they're currently in. We have had elections. Our troops were killed protecting people to vote in those elections. I know that people always like to have a quick fix on these things. The simple answer is that there is no quick fix. Or to put it another way, there is a quick fix for us, but it would be a disaster for the people of Afghanistan. I wish people would remember that.
So the public perception is largely that this war is continuing and will perhaps never stop, or at least the figures, the suggestion is 30 years we could be there for at least how long it could take. Hazel, what are your thoughts on this? What's the plan, so to speak? Do you agree with the extra troops?
Well, first of all, just to say that I agree with virtually every single word that Douglas has just said. I think there's a big choice really and a big decision to be made. Do we really mean it? And are we prepared to put the resources in to achieve the mission that's been set? And if we don't mean it, then we should be out of it. And I think that point really does need to be grasped now.
How long would you give it?
Well, it's not a matter of how long you give it. I think you have to decide what are your objectives. Are you prepared to commit the people, the resources, perhaps in a very unpopular political way in order to achieve that mission? And if you're not, then there's no point in being there in a half-hearted fashion, because all you'll do is it will just linger on for year after year after year. And I've felt very strongly for a long time now that we've carried a burden, America's carried a burden. I do not feel that the rest of the partners have really stepped up to the plate. And if the world wants to be protected from what has been nurtured by the Taliban in Afghanistan, then the rest of the world has to take a responsibility to deal with it. It has been a haven for terrorism, for Al-Qaeda, and we've seen the effects of that in our country on 7/7. And if we want to never see that happen again, we're going to have to deal with it. Now, it could be 500 troops, it could be whatever.
If you're saying it's not piecemeal, is that right? You're saying it's not piecemeal. Then the former Defence Secretary, John Hutton, said that earlier on this year we'd invest to have sent those troops, those 500 troops then. So if it's not a case of being piecemeal, are we getting a kind of contradiction there in what's going on in the government in terms of the whole package being there at once when it's needed?
No, I think what the government is responding to is what the military are asking for and saying we need these troops, and therefore the government has given a commitment that whatever the military asks for, it will be supplied, including equipment and making sure that the troops have got the kind of equipment that they need there.
You don't agree with John Hutton's comments?
No, this is being driven by the military. They're making requests. The government is responding to those requests, but I think there's a broader issue here. Are we really committed to that mission?
You don't agree with John Hutton's comments, though, that he made this week in regards to the extra troops could have been put in a bit earlier?
Well, I mean, that's John's view. He was Defence Secretary at the time. I wasn't Defence Secretary.
But now you're not in government anymore. No. I'm thinking you might be able to be a bit more free in your open opinion.
Well, I think I've been very free in terms of addressing the mission. In terms of what the military have asked for, I'm not privy to that. My understanding is that when the military asks for extra troops, it's a response to that request that the government supplies those extra troops and the equipment. So, as far as I know, there isn't a dispute between the military and the government on what kind of troop numbers they want.
OK, let's just quickly try and get some comments because we've only got a minute left. Let's just go to the gentleman at the back.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, I think a lot of Canadians would find that quite offensive that you didn't say they should a lot of the burden because they've suffered some of the most casualties. And secondly, the real thing that people are angry about is how under-equipped a lot of our soldiers are. There have been so many lives wasted because they weren't equipped. And I'm sorry, but as a member of Cabinet at the time, you've got blood in your hands.
Right, OK, Douglas.
If I may just quickly, also, it came up earlier, the idea of a timeline. You'll always see pressure being put on the government, indeed on our military, to provide a timeline for withdrawal in this situation. Please do drop this idea if you have it. Timelines for withdrawal are really only of interest to our enemies. They're of very little help to us or to our forces. And if I just may quickly, the gentleman there, you're quite right, by the way, to mention our Canadian allies in this. But if I can just quickly say the comment you made, that by the way, I think it's clear I held no brief for either Hazel or the Labour Party, or indeed any party. I think what you said has to be cautioned a little, if I may. When terrorists attack you, when terrorists take over civil societies in other countries, you have a choice on your hands. You either have the choice of allowing them to keep what they take and to kill with impunity, or you have to do something about it. If you do something about it, you'll be accused of having perpetuated the problem. So in that case, you either have the choice of sitting on your hands and saying, we deserve it if you're attacked, or you say we should do something about it. Now, there are all sorts of disagreements, I'm sure, that we have on this panel and in this hall tonight about both Iraq and Afghanistan. But do bear in mind, please, the following. Al-Qaeda does represent only the pinhead of a very substantial enemy, a very serious enemy, which desires you harm, even if you desire it no harm. And that enemy, I submit, has to be tackled. It is not one you can simply sit down and negotiate with. It's not one you could wish away. It's real, it's there, and we have to fight it. To that extent, if the government has blood on its hands, it should be something which you should be proud of.
OK, thank you very much. One more comment. Yes?
I actually agree with what he's saying about taking Al-Qaeda completely. My issue was with troops not having the right armour and not having the right equipment, and that's what I meant.
OK, we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Let's go back to the questioner. Elena, would you like to make a comment on what you think?
I don't think that sending troops necessarily will make the situation any better. I think that other issues need to be tackled, and sending troops is kind of like the way of the government showing that we are doing something about the situation, but not necessarily directly tackling it.
What do we tackle though?
I think that obviously another approach needs to be taken because this isn't working, and I don't know what, but that's just my opinion.
Okay. With the greatest respect, we'll have to end it there, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed for your comment.